Hello, good morning, Per. How are you doing today?
Good morning, Maciek. It's a lovely morning. So soon we can start skiing. I hate summer. I'm just kidding. I love summer too. How is life in
you
Poland?
live in you live in Sweden. Sweden is cold. It's not as hot as Warsaw at the moment. We have more than 30 degrees today, and if not for the air condition that I have in my attic office, I would be dying. Okay.
Now you're bragging about your wonderful climate.
Yes, and but Sweden. Actually, now that you mention it, skiing. I've heard there's some good skiing in Sweden.
Yes, indeed. It is the favorite. Ice hockey and skiing is what we do in Sweden in the winters. So the slopes are great and the climate is pretty good for skiing. So I love that.
Am I invited?
You are always invited, Maciek. But if you want to see snow in Sweden, you need to wait a few months. But then just jump on the airplane and come.
I will do that. I will do that, Per, because I'm crazy. I just spent 2 weeks hiking in the Slovenian mountains, and it was perfect. But I think I'm ready for the next adventure in the mountains, which is the skiing season, which I cannot wait. I cannot wait to go. And I've never skied in Sweden. I've skied in so many
Ah,
different places in the world, but I take it as an invitation. I invited myself. Thank you so much.
beautiful. Just come.
Today we are going to talk about, this is the second kind of a episode in a series of the discussions, and today we wanted to talk about how partners should assess their place on the journey from VAR to MSP. And maybe let's spend the first couple of minutes reminding everybody why, what is an MSP and why being an MSP is an important exercise.
Yeah. So I like this topic, and I think that helping legacy partners to become modern partners is important, and there's a good opportunity here. So, a legacy partner is likely going to be a VAR, value added reseller, that sells stuff, that sells licenses and sells hardware, and they probably do a little bit of break and fix as well. Perhaps a few projects on the side, but basically they are transactional. They do new deals all the time. And if you're an MSP, well, you do the deal once and you make sure that your customer is super happy and that customer will stay with you forever. And that is called recurring revenue. It's
I like
beautiful.
how you phrase this, because you say legacy partners versus the modern partners, and I truly believe that that's and people that assume or consider themselves to be the resellers or value resellers shouldn't feel offended by this, because this is how, unfortunately, the market is evolving. The market is evolving way more towards the subscription services, to services as a service model for everything that we do. We see that in cars, we see that in applications, we see that in the videos that we watch, the books that we read. Everything as a service, everywhere as a service model is prevailing. And if you have not made the jump yet, the transition yet, I think it's high time.
Yes, it really is. And one beautiful thing with as a service, as a concept, is that you constantly improve what you are delivering to your customer. So the customer gets like a little bit more innovation every month. So it's beautiful, not just for the partner, but also for the customer.
We have prepared a couple of slides because from my conversations with the partners, I often hear, "Hey, Magic, you know what?" Uh, from my former days when I was working for Hewlett Packard Enterprise, majority of the partners were in this transactional space, when they were basically taking a piece of hardware with software on it, putting a margin on it, selling it to the customer, doing a project, moving on, doing a project, moving on. That was majority of the channel, and I have a big heart for all the HPE and HP channel partners that are out there, and I would like to make sure that we help you guys to make this transition, because it's not an easy exercise. I spoke to a few partners that made a transition, and they say it's a multi-year journey many times, because there are several areas that you need to consider when you want to move from one business model to the other. But before you move to any new business model, you need to assess your current position, where you are, what is your current setup at the moment, what are the areas that you need to consider, and what is the current status of your company at the moment, correct, Per?
Yes, absolutely. Because otherwise, you will be trapped in the Groundhog Day movie. Like when you wake up, every day is the same. You start afresh and you need to do things. Well, you need to do the same things that you did the last day, the previous day. So, like, instead of always having to sell new stuff, potentially to the same customer or to other customers, well, you sell once and you enjoy the fruits of that journey.
So together with Per, we have prepared a couple of slides, just I think 3 or 4. So it's not going to be a very long, boring presentation of 350 slides. It's more of a couple of tips or areas for the consideration that we want you to take into account. And later on, we'll release maybe a bit of an assessment survey that you can use for yourself. But treat this video as a kind of a very simple assessment survey for what your position, where you are on the journey from the VAR to MSP. So I'm going to go into a presentation mode.
And I think that conversations like this you should have, like, with not just with yourself, but with your whole leadership team, and potentially also with your extended leadership team, because if you believe in this, well, it needs to be all man on deck in order to fulfill what you want to achieve.
Executive commitment is super important, and I think if you are the change agent in your organization, in your company, and you really feel like this is the right thing to do, but you struggle to get other executives on board, this video should help you, to convince them. If this video is not enough, then please reach out to Per and myself, and we are happy to jump on the phone and have a more kind of a more interesting conversation with the leadership team to help you to assess where you are and what are some of the challenges. I hope the video is enough, but if not, we are there for you. We are there to help you. So just don't hesitate to reach out to us.
And we love conversations like that, because it is when you talk to an actual partner about their specific challenges, you can come with the right advice. And it is fun. It is something that also helps us develop.
No,
Evolve.
and I think you're touching a very, very important point. Many of the channel partners I spoke with, they say, look, whenever I go to some, kind of a companies that offer me transition services, everybody offers me one size fits all. And I totally agree with you. Every company is a little bit different. So giving everybody the same package might work for some companies, but I think the outcomes might be disappointing. I think Per and I believe in a customized approach, hyper-personalized approach. And by the way, hyper-personalization is one of the big trends in the market that you need to, kind of embrace. So Per and I are already embracing this concept. Not every company is the same. You need a very tailored and customized approach to the transition, and that's why I think we're happy to have a conversation, because with every company, with every conversation, we learn something new, and we help maybe from a different angle and have a design a different path for success. Okay.
And differentiation is a way to success. You don't want to look the same as your competitors. You want to do something special.
Absolutely, yes. Okay. Be different, differentiate yourself, and you need a hyper personalized journey to success. So the first conversation that I typically have with the partners when they ask me, about this transition is, Yeah, but I'm already an MSP, and many partners that come to me and say like, hey, Magic, maybe I'm already there. And then I typically start asking them a question about the structure of the revenue. Where is their income? Where is the money coming from? How are they doing? And this table I like a lot because it helps to stir in the mirror and the mirror of truth and understand
Yes.
what is your real picture, the real picture.
And
And I don't
and
know.
sometimes like reselling gives you revenue, but it doesn't give you profitability. So it might look like your business is a big business because you're reselling tons of hardware every month. But if your margin is super slim, well, that doesn't bring food to the table.
But there's also a confusion, per I guess, because everybody pretty much knows what does it mean to resell hardware and software. Okay, there are still some partners that say reselling software is MSP. It's not. Let me put this immediately into bed, right? If you're taking a license and resell it, even if it's a software license, of a very popular software, it's not necessary. It's not an MSP contract. The same with a lot of partners telling me, hey, I'm selling the Microsoft 365. Okay, it's a recurring revenue, so I'm an MSP. You're not.
Exactly.
So reselling cloud software, even if it's a recurring revenue, doesn't qualify to be an MSP as an MSP contract. Many
No,
of the
and
partners tell
margins
me,
are slim and will be even more slimmer next year and the year after that. So like it is not the path for the future. You need to add something that is special. Add your own IP or some IP that is special that you have brought in. Then,
yes, but some of the channel partners tell me, yeah, I'm already reselling services, even sometimes third-party services. I think it's if your profile, if the profile of your company means a concentration of your revenue in this kind of a top right corner, you're not an MSP. You're not
no,
an
and your
MSP.
margins will be like between 5 or 10%, probably.
In the near future, even slimmer. The challenge is that like that means that majority of your business is simply coming from the resource services and products and services and software, and that means you are not an MSP, and that means that you have to do something differently. So where the MSP business starts, it's more in this area. Even hourly support and project services do not really qualify as an MSP contract. You have
Exactly.
to move to an SLA driven services, private cloud, this kind of activities. That will that will mean that you are the MSP, right, Per?
Exactly. And one thing that kind of proves if your nature is MSP is it important which people from your company that are involved in delivery? If that is important, well, then you are probably selling professional services, perhaps repackaged. But if it is like SLA driven services, it doesn't matter if it is Joe, Jim, or Anna that takes the call, then you are on the path of becoming an MSP.
Okay. So an ideal so to complete the picture that we are describing here, I think you need to look at this table like that. Okay. The less, I
Exactly.
mean, and there will be very few partners that will have no reselling, but in the ideal world, you might have having no reselling. It's not a bad thing. I know quite a few partners that have completely dropped reselling hardware and software. They completely moved to an SLA driven contracts. Okay. But if you have a lot of resell, if you have none of the SLA driven services, none other services, the two red flags, that means that your journey is going to be super, 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 super hard.
Yeah. And on the bright side, a lot of potential for making things better.
A lot of potential for making things better, and the payoff at the end of the journey is going to be pretty significant. And that's something that we are going to talk about towards the end of this conversation. Okay, so have a look at this picture and fill the dots, take a screenshot, fill the dots, and this is the window, sorry, this is the mirror that will show you what is your true picture. Okay, you can really look at yourself and say, where am I on this journey? But we have some other questions just to help you to understand better your company structure and the company position. So Per and I, we have prepared a couple of questions that you should ask yourself to really, kind of assess whether your mindset, the mindset of your organization, is changing to an MSP. Because becoming an MSP means not only, kind of changing your company systems, or just moving to the SLA-driven business. It's a pretty significant overall change. And over the next couple of weeks, we will be talking with her about those areas that require a change. But today is just the highlights. It's just a couple of highlights of where you need to focus.
And I
First
like that
off,
you're using the word mindset, because that's where it starts. Mindset needs to be changed from the leadership down to the lowest ranking person in your company. Everyone needs to change their mindset, and that's something that takes time. And everyone needs to be motivated in order to walk in that direction.
absolutely. And a few companies that I spoke with, they said that because of this cultural shift challenges, they actually had to spin off or start a separate company because the change was too difficult for some of the rank and file employees. Okay, so they had to almost open a new company and then over time transition the business to the new company. And some people would transition together with the business, but some people would refuse to change the mindset, and they would effectively leave the company and move uh, to another organization. So mindset is a very important element in this exercise.
And one great example is Catapult in the US, that made that change by creating a separate entity that was kind of competing with the old Catapult. So if your people are not willing to change, well, consider finding the ones that are willing to change and create a separate department, legal entity, or whatever. Perhaps you
Yeah,
shouldn't
right.
compete with yourself, but you can find other customers that are more ripe for recurring revenue businesses.
Yes. That's what I've heard from a number of partners that they had to do in the end. So it is a pretty challenging exercise, and something people have to consider. Anyway, ask yourself: can you service customers that you cannot physically visit? If you
And that's
can,
important. Yeah.
then you have a good element for the transition. I'm not saying that you are an MSP, but you have one of the key capabilities that will enable the transition for you, right, Per?
Exactly. And that's one of the beautiful things by being an MSP, that you can serve customers that are not in your hometown. And that means that you can go after customers in a certain vertical, regardless of their location. That's
Correct.
opportunity.
And so like when you will get there, you will understand why being able to service customers without the physical connection is so important in the MSP business. If you don't understand it today, trust us, that's one of the key elements or capabilities that you need to have to be successful as an MSP. How are you measuring the return on your customers? I think that's an important topic, Per.
Yeah, and return is both in financial terms, but also in customer satisfaction terms. So the first thing is to make sure that you do measure. And when you measure, you can set goals to make sure that your customers should be happier next quarter when you do the uh, updated measurement about their satisfaction levels, and also financially. If you are an MSP, you will likely find that the longer you serve a customer, the higher your margin will go. Because at the start, you probably have like a pretty not impressive margin, but after a while, you I'm not saying that you are controlling the customer, but you are controlling parts of the IT department. You are seeing what problems that have occurred in the past, and together with the customer, you have made measures to make sure that these problems are not as frequent in the future. And that is good for the customer, but it also helps your margin.
Yes, but one thing that you need to understand is in the MSP business, measuring the success on a customer does not necessarily mean the margin, the profitability on the customer. The way the MSP business is structured is many times there is a big upfront cost when acquiring a customer or acquiring a certain capability. So if you're going to let's say you put a help desk together, uh, initially you need to make an investment to make sure that you can serve the customer, and it's probably not paying off. So your margin is going to be slim, but the margin is going to improve over time. So your number one measurement when you are looking uh, at the customer is not necessarily a pure profitability at the kind of a given period of time. It's more uh, average margin per customer for, let's say, 12 months period. That's how you're going to assess. You're not going to assess each and every transaction that you do with a customer, each and every sell that you are doing with a customer. It's more the revenue or margin from the customer over a certain period of time. But there are also other measures that should consider when you think about measuring the success with the customer, because your success with the customer being an MSP is going to come from two factors: how much recurring revenue you can build over time and upgrade over time, and how much you can drop your cost of serving customer or pool of customers at certain point in time. So what you need to measure as well, the success of measuring return on a customer, is also measuring the average resources cost per customer. That's going to be super crucial for you when you are kind of becoming an MSP.
And one thing that is important is that you take an industrialized approach. So you have a standardized way of delivering your services. If you have customized all your services depending on what customers you got, then you will probably end up with poor quality and poor profitability, and probably poor customer satisfaction as well. So standardization is good. So here I would say that one size fits all.
Yes, that's true. That anything that you can standardize within your organization is going to help you to reduce the resources cost per customer, which is going to make the customer contract more and more successful. So away from transactions, away from revenue per transaction, margin per transaction, more annual revenue, annual margin, and the cost of the resources per customers that are employed to serve this customer are going to be the measurement of a success for your customers. Another dimension that you need to ask yourself is, how do you measure and compensate your salespeople? In a transactional typical business, what you have is again, every deal counts, right, Per?
Yes. Every deal counts, and you get a bag of money after a transaction, and you pay out compensation out of that bag. But when you are an MSP, you you will get your money every month or every quarter, depending on how you build your customers. But your salespeople probably wants to have the bulk of their compensation paid upfront when the contract is signed or when the customer starts the service. So you need to make sure that your cash flow can handle paying upfront compensation. And sometimes you do like a mix, like 80% upfront and then 20% or something like that over time, and a little bit of a bonus when the customer renews the contract.
Obviously, in the ideal world, you would like to, kind of build so much services with each and every, or kind of a contracts with each and every salesperson that they can basically be measured on what they actually deliver, and that's the ideal situation, right?
Yes.
I remember, when HP many years ago had to change the accounting rules. I had to do internally a transition for my team and myself, where a portion of my revenue was coming from the recurring business and a portion of my revenue was coming from those kind of a one-off deals. And that was a pretty interesting situation, because initially it was very difficult to do, because obviously I sold a big deal for a couple of $1 million, but the revenue recognition would only allow, I don't know, 1 month from 36 months of the deferral process. So that was really painful. But then as we accumulated the deferred revenue over time, it became a nice kind of I would start every quarter with already build up revenue that I've done in the previous quarter. So I think there is this kind of a process that you need to take to transition your salespeople from, kind of a compensation per deal to a more kind of a smoothen or recurring compensation from the business. And that's one more silver lining in this exercise. Once you build with your salespeople, with your best salespeople, this kind of a recurring revenue compensation program, they are more likely to stay with your company,
Yes.
because going somewhere else, they would have to build it from scratch, which is not, necessary, an easy exercise. So then you can also manage differently the compensation structure and expectations. Yeah.
And this is super important, because if the sales compensation model doesn't work, then it will be super hard or impossible to motivate your salespeople to sell recurring revenue services.
Okay.
It's
The
game
second
over.
element of the sales compensation that is super important is ability for you to compensate for a cross sell and upsell. Because at the end of the day, when you're an MSP, you have, as few offers as possible, frankly saying, but you have a couple of offers. Like I've seen on a lot of web pages from the partners, 3 offers. Like a basic, advanced, and the enterprise level, right?
Yep.
Especially from the SMB perspective. So your goal, is to move the customer from the basic to advanced to an enterprise, or basic, core, enterprise, whatever your
Yep.
names are. So you need to be able to pay them more if they transition the customer over time to a higher service level agreement. Correct?
Yes. So, like, identify what success looks like and make sure that you are generous sharing that success with your people. That's the way you build a team.
That is correct. Next question: how does your relationship with customers look like? I think this is an interesting question, Per.
Yeah, it is not like you are phoning them every 5 years and saying, hey, do you want a bunch of new laptops? Instead, you have a constant relationship with your customers. You meet them periodically and you have an ongoing conversation.
I think there's another question that we actually have in this space, which is like, are you transactional or strategic partner to your customer? I think those two questions are somehow connected to each other,
Yes.
right? Are you calling them every 5 years because the laptop is, kind of getting a little bit old, and in your CRM system you have this kind of a red flag that says, hey, call this guy because he probably needs an upgrade. Same story with the server, same story with the storage. The MSP conversation is going to be, as Per said a couple of minutes ago, giving your customer a piece of innovation every month, every quarter, every couple of weeks. Show up, upgrade, offer new ideas, understand the problem, understand the business. Don't show up to refresh. Show up to help your customer to become better. And that's a major change in the both the relationship, but also again in the mindset of the partner.
And it is more fun, I would say, and it also opens up for less traditional salespeople. It might be that someone that is good understanding the customer's business will be more successful than a traditional salesperson.
Which is a chance for a lot of people, to be to be more and more successful, and also favors the companies that don't focus on the short-term goals. Like a lot of companies are very quarterly driven or monthly driven or whatever, from kind of a month to month to month to month, or quarter from one quarter to the other. The real good ones are more kind of a playing the long game, right? For the
Yeah, for
satisfaction of
every
the customer,
customers.
for the strategic relationship. Okay. Next question that we have is, um, do you know if you're going to break even next month or next quarter?
Yeah, that's the beautiful thing with recurring revenue, that you probably know pretty well what your revenue will be next week, next month, next quarter. And if you play your cards well, you can be pretty sure that it will probably be better than it was the previous period. So that's a beautiful thing with recurring revenue. And that is total opposite to a traditional partner that needs to sell new stuff every time.
It's more predictability. That's, I guess, the beauty of it, and that's why we're gonna talk about it in a minute. The valuation of the MSP contracts and the MSP companies is much higher, because when you have a number of contracts with the customers, they are the recurring contracts that cannot be just completely shut down, from one day to the other. So the predictability of the profit pools and the revenue pools is much higher than, I mean, customer might refresh their laptops and servers, or might say, I'm going to wait another month or another year or another, 6 weeks. Okay, you never know. Obviously, good salespeople can put some pressure on the system, on the customer, and try to get them to refresh faster than maybe it's absolutely necessary from a customer perspective, and they kind of beat the refresh cycle a little bit. But what if we have one of those economic downturns, where the customers are putting all the investment on hold, but an MSP contract, uh, it's much more difficult. It's going to be much more difficult to pull back on the services that are going to be delivered, and it's not going to be such a sharp, kind of a downturn. It's going to be moderated. So that's why a lot of kind of a private equity companies favor the SLA-driven business.
Absolutely. It's a big difference, and investors will pay for predictability. And
Absolutely.
uncertainty will never be paid very well.
The last question that we have for today is your profitability sustainable and acceptable, or do you work for free? Do you work for free? What do you mean, do you
Yeah,
work for free?
yeah. So like, if your margins, if your bottom line profits are like 1 or 2%, well, then you're probably kind of working for free. You're investing a lot of time in your company, and at the end of the day, well, there's not very much profits, and your company will likely not be worth much if you're trying to sell it. So, like, you want to drive a business that is profitable and for the long run. That is good for you, it is good for your customers, and it is good for your people that you employ. So everyone wins. Everyone loses when a company is not profitable, because then there is uncertainty whether that company will stay in business. And a company that goes out of business will be bad for the people that are employed, and it is super bad also for the customers that don't have someone that can serve them anymore. So don't be shy with your goals around profitability. And this is beautiful. With an MSP business, your profitability will likely be very good.
Very, very good. And so Per, I think we need to arrive at a certain kind of a piece of information for our listeners, because now we might have scared a lot of people off, and they would ask themselves, why should I bother? Okay, maybe I'm going to be a little bit more profitable, maybe I'm going to make a little bit more money, but what about the cost of making all this transition? What about the stress? What about all the challenges that I'm going to face? Maybe it's better just to stay where I am and just, kind of continue. I've been doing it for the last 10, 15 years. I've been always a great manager for my organization. I've been a great businessman. I've been very successful. I'm doing several $1 million. I'm doing, I don't know, $10 million a year in revenue, and it's a pretty stable business. Okay, it's going to be 9.5 or 10.5, so maybe it's not going to be always growing super fast, but it's a good stable business with my customers, and I should be happy with this.
So
Where is the
I
catch?
think that the journey is rewarding. The journey doesn't need to happen overnight, it will happen over time. You make a plan and you execute along that plan. So, of course, we can't win them all. Some companies will prefer to stay with their old business model, and we wish them all the best. But for the ones that wants something different, that wants to be part of this journey towards recurring revenue, higher profitability, better future, well, then we have the recipe. And the world is truly moving to recurring revenue, to as a service. So, like, it is more fun to be part of the future than to be part of the past. So don't be stuck in the past.
There's one more carrot in this exercise, which is the value of your company. It's a little bit of an eye chart, and I hope people are not watching this on the on their mobile phones, but maybe on their at their computers with a nice screen. But and maybe what I will do is use the magic of bringing a little bit closer some of the information that is on this slide.
Yeah, and it speaks for itself. Like, if you are a traditional reseller and you're selling your company, depending on how you look at valuation, if it is based on revenue or profitability, well, you will get very little from
Very
the
different
buyer.
numbers, right? Just to put things into perspective, okay? And we've taken this information from a public web page from ConnectWise, so you can go back and ConnectWise is a big company. No product placement. We are not sponsored by ConnectWise, but we believe ConnectWise is one of those kind of a companies that offer a very strong support for the MSPs. So ConnectWise has done some kind of a assessment with the private equities, and then they work with a lot of MSPs. And here is a funny story. So we spoke about, I gave you just a few seconds ago, an example of a company that does $10 million a year. At a certain point in time, the owner will think about transitioning out of this company. Okay, maybe selling it, or selling a piece of it, or asking, or maybe they would like to grow it further, and they will go and search for a capital investment to help them to accelerate their business, right? Well, $10 million company that is doing $10 million a year according to this research from ConnectWise, $1 of every resale within this $10 million is worth only 15 cents. What does it mean? That
It means that
$10 million,
pretty bad.
the company is worth $1.5 million at this point in time. So if you are only reselling your products, your $10 million a year company is only worth $1.5 million. Yes, if you do hourly support, break fee, retain, block time, whatever, this kind of a services. If you remember our little table from the start of the conversation, it was kind of we were moving further down. So there's this kind of a connection. For $10 million revenue, you're gonna get about 4.5. Is it good enough? Maybe to retire, yes, maybe not. But maybe for investment and growth for your kids, might be not enough. Have a look at the managed service area. The company that is doing $10 million in managed services will be worth $14.5 million. $1.5 million versus $14.5 million. I think it's a pretty big carrot, Per.
Absolutely. And I think that the difference is even bigger now, 2 years after this chart was composed. So it is night and day. It is really night and day. So like potentially you want to keep on owning your company, but you want to bring on investment. Well, then you don't want to dilute yourself too much. So if it is 15 cents on the dollar, then you're diluting yourself heavily. And if it is 1.45, then you can probably accept that dilution. So it is night and day. And
It's
this is
night and
exactly
day.
what investors are paying for. They are paying for predictability.
We also spoke about the fact that your profitability is much higher as an MSP. So I'm going to also bring the valuation based on the EBITDA, and it's here. Okay, so take $1 of your EBITDA, and it's when you're doing 7.5%, which is, I think, a lot of resellers are struggling nowadays with such a profitability, versus 15%, which I think it's pretty easy, from the MSP perspective. Then the difference is what, $6 to $8 is 25% difference, right? It's 25%.
Yes.
No, sorry, I'm making a mistake. $6 to $8 is a 33%, 1/3 more valuation. It's a 1/3 more valuation. So 6 divided by 2 is 3, and then so 1/3, another $2 on top. So it's 33% more valuation. Just kind of a moving from 7.5% profitability to 15, and who knows what the levels. I understand that the profitability of MSP could be much higher than that.
Yeah, and this is an important slide because it shows that higher profitability in terms of percent will benefit valuations. So investors, they want to see companies with a decent profitability level.
So now you can make sense of this kind of a slide, right? It's a combination. The combination of your SLA driven revenue and the profitability that it brings is going to significantly increase the valuation of your company. Whether you're looking for investment dollars to accelerate the growth of your company, or you're looking for a way to exit the business to comfortably retire, I think the carrot is there, and it's a pretty significant one, versus the stick that you're getting if you're staying in the reseller space and you're constantly being beaten by the vendors by slashing your MDF, slashing your margins, slashing your rebates, right? it's a kind of a pretty easy answer, I think, why it just pays to move from VAR to MSP.
Yeah, and it gives you a good night's sleep. You don't need to lay restless at night worrying about what will be the outcome of your business the next month.
Correct.
And that's worth a lot.
Let us know what you think about this conversation. Let us know what you think about our thoughts. If you have some different point of view, or if you would like to add. As I said, every time we have a conversation with you individually or together, we're gaining some new experience, some new learning. So we are super happy to have a chat. Reach out to us through LinkedIn. I think it's the easiest one. I'm very active on LinkedIn, and happy to answer any questions. Per, what is the best way to contact you?
LinkedIn always works. And
LinkedIn always.
as you say, it is wonderful to have conversations with partners that we have never met, and they hopefully learn a lot, and hopefully we learn a lot too.
Okay. Per, thank you so much for the conversation today. I enjoyed it so much. I still remember that you invited me to Sweden for skiing, and I'm gonna absolutely use that opportunity as soon as you have snow. So call me when you have snow, and also call me in a couple of weeks when we will talk about more detailed approach to transitioning from VAR to MSP, the cultural shift, the financial model differences, the sales and marketing differences, and some other aspects of the transition. Thank you so
Sounds
much.
great. I promise to deliver on both.
Thank you. Speak to you later.